right, welcome to our first after-school adventures and homeschool adventures class video of the spring. My name is Mr. Tom.
And I'm Miss Kaylee.
And we are so happy that you are joining us and want you to come out after you watch the video and explore the park. Miss Kaylee and I are going to do some videos and we're going to go exploring over the next few weeks. But definitely we want you guys to come out here and enjoy the classes as well. We know a lot of you, but some of you have never been here before. So we wanted to do something that, although some of you are familiar with our scavenger hunt, we wanted to do that for those of you who are new. So Miss Kaylee, can you explain our scavenger hunt that we're going to do this week?
I can. So this week we are going to do our green card scavenger hunt. Like Mr. Tom said, some of you might have done this before, but we're going to be talking about a lot of really interesting things when we do our walk. So you guys will all learn something new. So the way our scavenger hunt card works is there's a list of things that you guys will look out for when you go for your walk. And if you come with your parents and your siblings, they're welcome to participate. Are the cards going to be at the start of the trail, Mr. Tom?
To be determined.
Okay.
We might supply them to you because we're going to do some other scavenger hunts that you wouldn't find here. So we may coordinate with that with you, or with our after-school kids, unlike our preschool, we may just let you guys come out when you want to come out. So yes, I think they can just grab one of the scavenger hunt cards at the head of our trail, but we will email you all of that detail in the future.
So some of the things on our scavenger hunt card are things like quartz boulders, cedar sand, stone walls, drill holes in the quarry, things like that. And for every different thing that you're looking for, there's a bunch of boxes with check marks in them. So every time you see it, you can check it off. So you're not just finding something once, you're going to find things as many times as you can. And then when you're done, you can tally them up. And if you're going for a scavenger hunt with your parents or siblings, you can make it a little bit of a competition.
And in most cases, our interpretive signs, for those of you who are new, are all throughout the walk that we're going to take for the scavenger hunt. That will be the explanation to what you're looking for.
Yes.
Okay, but you will see it, like Miss Kaylee just said, you'll see it repeatedly. So just because something is at the sign doesn't mean that's the only time you'll find it. The harder something is to find, the more points you'll get, okay? So let us know how you do with this, all right? Now, we're going to give you guys some rules in a second, but before you guys come out here and start touching stuff, we have a lot of wildlife to breathe through their skin. We'll talk about that. We want you to come to our water tank because we know right now a lot of us are using a lot of antibacterial soaps and hand sanitizers. Those are things that if they're on our hands and we pick up some of the critters that live here, that could make them sick. So before you start your walks here, make sure that everybody gives their hands a good rinse at our tank. And then Ms. Kaylee, once they start on their walks, what are some rules that you think they should know about?
Okay, so one very important rule that we tell everyone who comes here is that when we're on the trails, we always need to walk instead of run. And that's because our trails have lots of rocks and roots on them, and if you run, you might not be able to see them and then you might trip and fall. So rule number one is definitely always walk, listen to your parents. Another very important rule is that we always want you guys to stay on our trails. They're really easy to see and they're really wide, but off the trail, there's something called poison ivy. So what does poison ivy do to us, Mr. Tom? Yeah, it makes us really itchy. So poison ivy is a really sneaky plant. It has 3 leaves and it's a little bit shiny, but sometimes poison ivy hides under taller plants, so you might not always be able to see it, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, so, and if you stay on the trails, you should not touch any poison ivy. We haven't seen any yet. We've been looking. Probably though by mid-May it'll start popping up, and by the end of May we'll try to pull it near the trail. But if you stay on the trails, you won't touch any. Stay on the trails, that way you won't get lost. And then Miss Kaylee, if they find a critter or some sort of animal like a frog or salamander, how should they treat it?
So you want to be really careful with the wildlife here because when we're out here, we're in the wildlife's home. You can pick up some things like worms, but if you do, you want to make sure that, like we said earlier, there's nothing like hand sanitizer on your hands. The best way to pick up an animal like a worm or a frog is to first get your hands dirty so you can rub them in the dirt of the path a little bit and then pick something up.
Yeah, so we want to be really gentle and careful with all of the wildlife. They need to be cared for that way, and it's their home, right? So we're their guests, so we want to be very, very gentle with them, okay? All right, so Miss Kaylee, are we ready to go on our scavenger hunt?
I think so. So Mr. Tom and I will be walking the path that you guys will then walk after us.
All right. Hi guys. All right, so right as you walk in, you get to our geology station. And Miss Kaylee, what are you standing next to there?
So this right here is one of my favorite rocks at the Discovery Zone because it's actually a quartz boulder. So if you guys haven't seen quartz before, quartz is really shiny like a gem.
Are you sure that's not an egg?
You know, I'm never positive, but I am pretty sure because we've been here for quite some time, and if it's an egg, it has not hatched yet.
Give it a good kick. That's pretty hard. Do you
I
guys
don't
think
think
that
it's
could
an
be an egg? No, I don't think so.
Yeah. But yeah, so if we were to crack this open, it would be really full of quartz inside of it. But the very first thing on your scavenger hunt is a quartz boulder. So you can go ahead and check off quartz boulder once you come on over to take a look at this.
Okay, you guys, so when we are going to supply you with these green scavenger hunt cards, and on the scavenger hunt cards, you're going to find several different items. Miss Kaylee, do we want to discuss them now, or we'll just talk about them as we see them? How do you want to do that?
I think just briefly. So as you can see, if you're holding your scavenger hunt card, there's a bunch of boxes for each thing. So we just went to go look at the quartz boulder, so we can check off the first box for quartz boulder. But if we see different quartz boulders along the way, you can keep checking them off.
Or different types of quartz is fine too. Yeah, absolutely.
And then you can write your total here. So that might be something fun to do too. Sometimes we do it with our classmates, but you could do it with your siblings if you're out with them. You can see who can find the most of different things.
And we created the scavenger hunt, you guys, so you'll see things repeatedly. So just because we're at a sign doesn't mean that's the only place you'll see something. But make sure you read the sign really well. I know Miss Erin has a good picture of that sign because there's also schist and gneiss that they're going to be looking for along the way too.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the really cool thing about being out in nature. Like Mr. Tom said earlier, we might find totally different things than you guys find.
All right, you guys, so the theme of the Discovery Zone and all of our signs is how people and animals have used the land past and present. So when you're walking through here, you're going to find evidence of different animals that live here, different plants too, but also different people that have lived here in the past as well. So we're going to be looking for all of those clues as we walk along here. And well, let's see, Miss Kaylee, we're coming up to a sign now that might give us a clue to some people who might have used the land in the past.
Yeah, I think so. So we are approaching the cedar stand sign. So cedar trees are a type of tree, and if we look this way, we can see that there's a lot of cedar trees on the ground. The cedar trees are usually the ones that have lots and lots of branches sticking out of them.
Or you can see they're starting to fall.
Yes.
Like right here where I'm pointing.
Yeah, so the cedar trees don't do a great job of standing upright like our other types of trees. But when you see a lot of cedar trees like this, it's a really good clue that this land used to be farmland. So if we take a look at our scavenger hunt, we can see there's the cedar stand check option on the scavenger hunt. So me and Mr. Tom are going to check off cedar stand. So this is one of the cedar stands that we have at the Discovery Zone. And while you're walking, you can continue looking for other ones as well.
There's definitely other ones. So really quickly, because we don't want to take too much time, but on the sign, it'll talk about this more. But we have two tree cookies here. This is a cedar tree cookie, and this is a maple tree cookie. They're basically both the same size, circumference, roundness is about the same. But if you come here, you should count the rings on the trees. Ms. Kaylee, what does each ring represent for these tree cookies?
So some of you guys might know this, but every ring on a tree cookie, there's one ring for every year that the tree has lived. So that's why the bigger trees that we see out here are usually also wider, because every single year they get a little bit wider. So if you count the rings on a tree cookie, you know how many years that tree lived.
Okay, so when you come here, I want you guys to count these. They're a little hard to count, but I think you'll find that the cedar tree has more rings. So what does that mean?
That means that the cedar tree's older.
It's older. But when we look up, and you'll notice this a lot more by mid-June, we'll see more of the leaves come out, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with maple leaves. Most of these are maple trees, some oak, and then the cedar. But I guess the question is, why would the cedar be so much shorter than the maple?
That is a good question. So one of the reasons that the cedar is much shorter is because if the maple trees were here first and they were able to get taller, they could block out some of the sunlight and stop the cedar trees from growing as tall.
But if
So
this
that's
was a cedar stand, and this was a farm, there probably weren't any maple.
Right.
So I guess the question is, which is growing faster? Does the cedar grow faster than the maple? I want these guys to think about that, and then we'll answer that a little later. Which tree is growing faster? Because what's happening is that the maple is growing above the cedar. So you guys think about that. Why then, once the leaves come out and it shades the cedar, why would the cedar all be falling over and dying? What do all trees need? They need water, and they need something else that we see a lot of today. They need sun, right? So if the cedar aren't getting enough sun, you can see what happens to them. All right, so this was all farmland. The Discovery Zone used to be farmland. But we're walking down Froggy Freeway. Our first turn will be down Memory Lane. And there we can talk about that quartz boulder that Miss Kaylee was discussing with you. And maybe we can think of some other people that might have lived here even before the farmers. So we are going to turn down Memory Lane. Remember what Miss Kaylee said about walking, not running. This is a really good trail to remember that rule.
There's lots of roots.
It's really rocky and there are lots of roots. Don't walk backwards like this Tom.
So while you're walking, take a look around and try and imagine what this land would have looked like when it was farmland. It's kind of hard to do because everything is so overgrown now.
But Miss Erin can take a picture of our sign over here. That gives you a little glimpse of what it would have looked like.
So she's taking a picture of the sign for an early 19th century road. So I think it's in the shot, but there are really close rows of stone walls, one on this side of the trail and one on this side of the trail. And if we look this way, there's also really close stone walls on this side of the path. So we have to wonder, Mr. Tom, who built those stone walls and why are they so close together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So stone walls are a way that farmers used to build sort of like fences around their pastures. And the stone walls are only that high because if you think about it, they would have lifted those rocks by themselves and put them up on top of the wall. And if we get a little bit closer, you can see that some of them are pretty big and probably pretty heavy. But the walls only needed to be this high to stop animals like cows from getting out, so it wasn't a problem.
Yeah, and in this case, in this particular case, these two on side to side, that was actually the way they made a road. Mm-hmm. So this was an old road. This particular, we're going to see some really awesome stone walls on our walk. So now Miss Kaylee and I can check off stone walls. You will definitely see some really big stone walls in this park. And those were, like Miss Kaylee said, they're all over the place, and they were used to contain the pasture, to designate this is, where properties started and stopped. But did they have like big machines back in the days when farmers lived here, Miss Kaylee?
No, like I said before, they had to do all of this lifting by themselves.
So you can imagine, you guys, why they stopped maybe right around here, right? Because if you can see what I'm doing, if you can imagine a really big rock, this is a small one. Of course, I picked a small. But you don't want to pick up a big giant rock and lift it much higher than that, right? Because that would be just too heavy. That's why these stone walls, generally speaking, were about this high, because it just was a lot of work for the farmers to do anything more than that. And then, when do we think that these stone walls were built, typically, Miss Kaylee?
Well, we think they were built when the farmers were here, so probably in the early 19th century, right, Mr. Tom?
Some of them even earlier. Some of them, probably this one, yes. And then we have some that might be even 18th century.
So before we go too far that way, we want to point out the gate, right?
Oh, sorry. Yep.
So another thing that's really interesting, like Mr. Tom was saying, this was a road, so it was really likely that this was one person's property over here, and that was another person's property over there. But there's a big gap in the stone wall right here. So what do you think that the gap would have been? Probably a gate, right? So if we walk into the gate a little bit, and you guys can do this too, there's a piece of old cedar wood right here that's sort of leaning against the stone wall. And if you guys, when you're here, you can look really closely, but there's an old nail in the cedar stand gate post. So you definitely don't want to touch the nail, but the nail is a clue that that was a gate post. And if you look at your scavenger hunt, cedar gate posts in old stone walls is something we can check off.
All right, you guys. Now we're coming to one of our really cool stations that I know you're going to like a lot. This is our Native American tool making area. And so when Miss Kaylee was at the quartz boulder, our first stop, you could see the boulder from the outside, but now you can actually see, and Miss Erin took a picture of the sign that showed that milky quartz. Well, now you can see what happens when you break those up. Miss Kaylee, does that look like something that would be used for something potentially?
It does, yeah. That does not look like a natural break because it's really pointy. So if this is the Native American tool making station, think for a second what Mr. Tom might be holding.
Yeah, so this could be a tool used for what? Well, first of all, when would the Native Americans have been here? Would they have been here after the farmers or before?
Good question.
What do you guys think? Long time ago, right?
Yeah.
Way before the farmers.
Yeah.
So back then, you know, there wasn't a Big Y or Stop and Shop, right? So how do they survive? How do they eat?
Well, they had to do all of their food gathering themselves. So Native Americans in this area would have hunted animals. They would have gathered nuts and berries. They were really in tune with the land. And another way that they're in tune with the land is, like Mr. Tom was saying, they couldn't go to the store and buy like a shovel or something. They had to make all of their tools themselves out of natural materials like quartz. So these tools that we're seeing could have been arrowheads, things like that Native Americans would have used.
And these pieces of quartz, when you break them, they just break into, you know, hundreds of pieces. So it worked out really well for them. They could pick out the really sharp ones, use them for hunting animals. They could use them on their fishing lines to catch fish. And then right where Miss Kaylee is standing, this rock, we believe is a rock where they would sit and break up their quartz pieces and make the tools from there. So that's pretty cool, you guys. And if you come here, you'll see all these little chips, all these little chippings of quartz. We'll ask you not to take them because we want to make sure that everyone, you know, years from now can come here and see that. So please don't take any of these home. We will have a scavenger hunt for you with rocks this spring, so you'll get some rocks. Don't worry about that. But definitely, you can see there's literally hundreds and hundreds of them here. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So we can check that off, and then I don't know if we'll see any more. Do we have a spot for that?
We do. It's quartz, gneiss, and schist fragments. So a fragment is a small piece of rock. So that's where we can check that off.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, when you come up here, you guys, make sure you don't run back down here because there's definitely some roots here that'll trip you up. So definitely spend some time here and imagine how long ago this might have been used.
Yeah, and again, the land probably looked really different when the Native Americans were here. Do you guys think there were stone walls when the Native Americans lived here? Probably not, because they were here before the farmers.
And then keep looking around. So far, what are we looking for? We're looking for cedar stands. We're looking for, oh, I think I see one.
I think I see a cedar stand too.
All right, I'm going to check it out because I think there's one here. We're not going to keep telling you stuff because we want you to look for stuff too. But you'll definitely see some more cedar stands. You'll
remember, when you're looking for cedar trees, they look like this, where they're kind of bristly with a lot of short branches.
Okay, now I think I just saw a butterfly. One item that's not, the sign is not in the right place, so I think we should discuss it now. Another piece of evidence that this was all farmland is that there's something known as a wolf tree. And the wolf tree would be the one tree that would stand alone before this was a forest and it was just farmland. There'd be one tree. And when you leave Memory Lane, we're not gonna show it to you, but I want you to look really hard right about where we're standing now and look for one tree that looks really different because its branches are coming out to the side of it. How do most of these trees look to you, Miss Kaylee?
A lot of them don't have branches, especially at the lower levels, and that's because usually when trees grow branches, they need to get above the canopy so they can reach enough sunlight to grow branches. So like Mr. Tom said, when you're looking for our wolf tree, the wolf tree might have branches that are way lower than everyone else's. Remember that we said that trees get wider as they get older,
Yep.
So we definitely expect, remember the farmers were probably here, what, like 300 years ago?
Yes.
So we are looking for a tree that's over 300 years old.
And it's definitely wider.
I also just want to point out that we just turned left out of Memory Lane, and now we're back on Froggy Freeway.
Right, so we're going to do the quick little loop like we did on Memory Lane. We leave that, now we're going to go straight down Froggy Freeway. We'll also provide, parents will provide you guys with some maps. You can pick that up at the park as well.
Okay, so we are coming up at the end of Froggy Freeway, and there's another sign right here called the Scotch Pine Plantation. So a Scotch Pine Plantation is when you have pine trees that grow naturally in the forest, and you can find evidence that trees were once planted in a straight row. So remember, something that the farmers might have done is planted trees to kind of get the forest to come back. And if you see trees that are planted in a straight row, then that means that they probably weren't planted naturally. So over here we used to have a good Scotch Pine Plantation.
But you can see, you guys, these guys, you'll just have to sort of believe us. These trees that are all falling over, those are Scotch pine. And and that's the cool thing though about nature, it changes, right?
Yeah.
We probably put this sign here in 2007, so 13 years ago, there were at least 6 or 8 pine trees that were just straight back there. And like Miss Kaylee said, if you see a line of trees in a row, you know that Mother Nature didn't plant it that way, right? It would have to be someone was planting a grove here. And that's what they tried to do. So straight back there was a pine plantation. And while you walk around, I think there's one other in the park. I don't know if you'll find it on the walk we're doing today, but at least you can check off pine plantation on your scavenger hunt card. All right, so we're gonna keep going straight down Froggy Freeway to our next stop. Now we're at our Lycopodium sign. Lycopodium, that's kind of a weird sounding name for something. Aaron, maybe you can get a close-up shot of the sign. But Miss Kaylee, what does it remind you of when you see Lycopodium?
So Lycopodium reminds me of a Christmas tree.
Yeah, they're like little miniature Christmas trees. And
Yeah.
we have them all over the park. And we walked by a huge amount of it earlier. We just didn't mention it. So this one, if you're going to try to get a lot of points, if you have a brother or sister that you're doing this, with, you guys can definitely get a lot of points by finding Lycopodium throughout the park. No question about that.
Definitely.
And again, this is a little bit like the pine plantation, because when we put this sign here, Miss Kaylee, this area, I swear to you, it was covered with Lycopodium.
Yeah, I remember.
And now it's all moved,
It's nothing.
or a lot of it is moved. But I think Miss Kaylee spied some earlier.
I can point some out over here. There are 2 very little Lycopodium trees. One here and one here. But yeah, like Mr. Tom said, it's all over. So especially on your way back out of the park, you can definitely find a lot. And while I'm over here, I'm also going to point out something else that's on our scavenger hunt.
On the other side of your card, you
Yes.
guys.
Even though we'll talk about it later too, it's a completely decomposed log. So right here at my feet, you can see what looks like really orange bark. But what it actually was a log that was sitting here And then decomposing animals like worms and beetles got it to look like this, so now it's decomposed. But we'll talk about that more later.
Decomposing, yeah.
Decomposing, yes.
All right, you guys, so we're at the bridge. We're going to go across the bridge, and then we're going to keep walking, and we're going to get to the corner of Froggy Freeway and Hawk Highway. And then we're going to turn down Hawk Highway. All right, guys, so when you get to the intersection, when you are at the end of Froggy Freeway, you follow Hawk Highway. So you're going to turn to your left. You're not going to go up the hill. We're going to come back down that way. That's all part of Loop 1. But you're going to take a left, and we're going to stay down Hawk Highway, okay? So we're still on Hawk Highway, and we're at our 19th century quarry. What's a quarry, Miss
So
Kaylee?
a quarry is a place where people would go, especially farmers, to basically excavate big pieces of rock. So our quarry is made out of granite, which you guys might be familiar with what granite is, but it's a really strong rock. And it's actually what the stone walls were partially made out of, because people would go up to the quarry, take big pieces of rock down, and then use them to build house foundations and stone walls and things like that.
So when you get to
We're going up?
Yeah, we'll go up here, you guys. But when you get up here, I want you to look really hard for evidence that these rocks have been changed by humans. Because rocks generally don't have big drill holes in them, okay? So we're not going to show you where they are. We're going to let you find them. But there are definitely drill holes in here that the farmers would use to break up this rock. And then if you look around at these pieces where I'm standing up and above and around here, I suppose it could be from frost heaves, but probably not, right, Miss Kaylee?
Right.
These look pretty flat. It looks like they've been shaped. I can actually see around here evidence of where they might have broken off pieces of rock.
Mm-hmm.
So check this out, you guys. So for farmers, they had to find other ways aside from just farming to make extra money. So they would sell these pieces of granite, and they'd probably be used for houses in this area, for foundations for the house. And then they could have broken them up. It was hard work to do that. Then roll them back down the hill. So when you're up here, you can imagine them breaking up these big pieces of rock, rolling them down a hill. They probably have an oxen down waiting to cart that away. And again, when you look at this, and I think this is something we need to discuss again, Miss Kaylee, when you look at this area, we see all of these trees around here, but were they here back when they were working on this quarry?
Probably not, right?
No. These are, and what do you think? Are these older trees? They look kind of old, but in a way, or are they younger trees, do you think?
Well, so hopefully you guys remember what we've been talking about the tree rings. So based off of that, I would say these trees look pretty young.
Yeah.
Especially if you guys were able to find our wolf tree, then you'd be able to see the difference between these narrow trees and that bigger one. So yeah, so when you're up here, take a look for drill holes. Because the way that farmers would have broken these pieces of rocks apart, they didn't have like power tools. They would drill holes into the rocks, fill the holes with wood, and then wet the wood, because when wood gets wet, it expands, and that would just crack the rock in half. So it left behind these like cylindrical shaped holes that you can still
Or they would
find.
take a drill, they would literally have a little drill, and they would just, go throughout the piece like over here. And you can actually see, I shouldn't be pointing to it, but you'll see one where you can actually see the evidence of a drill. And then they would just keep drilling away until it breaks apart.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is a really cool place to explore and see what you guys can find.
Yeah, and nice clean pieces, a little different than the quartz, right? Because if you broke up the quartz, what happened, you guys? Remember what happened to it? It just broke up into hundreds of pieces. Here, they were able to keep these nice and clean so they can be used for a lot of uses for houses and other things such as that.
Yeah,
Right?
so if you were a farmer in the 1800s, you had to know how different types of rocks worked, basically.
All right, you guys, so now we're at the corner of Hawk Highway and Salamander Street. We're gonna do Loop 1. that means we're going to go on Salamander Street. Hawk Highway stays straight. That now turns into Loop 3. That takes you a long way. That's about a 1.6 mile hike. Not as many interpretive signs there, not as much for our scavenger hunt there. So we're going to stay on Loop 1. Now, when you start walking around on Salamander Street, all of a sudden, you start to notice something, I think. And I'm going to go off the trail. I know we're not supposed to, but I just want you to see what I'm looking at. What does that look like? Looks like someone might have done what to this tree at some point.
Looks like they maybe would have cut it down, right?
Yeah, and you're going to see a lot of that here. This was, we think about 60, 70 years ago, maybe a little less. I see one there, but you guys should look around. You can see these everywhere now. A lot of oak trees were cut out of here. And that's another way people use the land, right, Miss Kaylee?
Right. Yeah.
And this is probably more of a modern time where somebody owned the property and allowed someone to come in here to use it. I see more out to the distance. They're all over the place. And so we're getting to our next sign. And you can see sometimes something kind of quirky, something kind of weird happens when trees get cut. Because sometimes when a tree gets cut, what could happen to the root system, Miss Kaylee?
Well, so when a tree gets cut, the root system is still intact underground, right? So it can cause the tree to regrow, but in a different kind of way. So when we come up here, we'll see a good example of this. But right here off the trail, you can see there's a tree trunk, or there's a tree with 3 trunks. So usually that would have happened if the tree was cut down, but the roots were left, and then the tree grew back with multiple trunks.
So you guys look at all these stumps around here, and some of them start to regrow, like Miss Kaylee said.
Yeah.
And they don't just grow into one tree. If you've ever wondered how that works, just like she explained it.
Yeah, and even this one right here is a good example, because if you take a peek at it, I'm not too far off the trail, you can see it's starting to look like it's regrowing in 2 or 3 different places. So, pretty interesting. And you can even notice with that one, like the trunks aren't always the same size either. That one over there.
So this is our 3-trunk oak station. And just remember that, you guys, in case something like this might come up in a rock scavenger hunt question.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Just saying. All right, we're going to continue up Salamander Street. We got a couple other cool stops up there. We're at Life in a Rotten Log, and this is a really cool station. There's nothing on the scavenger hunt per se on this, but it's still really cool. We have some logs that are starting to break down, and Miss Kaylee, you mentioned this before when we found the rotting log by the Lycopodium sign. There's a lot of life in those logs, and what are they doing in there?
So yeah, animals that live in logs are usually eating the wood and decomposing the logs. So we call animals decomposers when they have the power to basically change like a tree into a pile of dirt as they decompose it. So animals that are decomposers include worms, pill bugs, different types of beetles, slugs. Mushrooms like to eat logs too. So you might find a lot of mushrooms on a log if you do this walk a little bit later in the year.
So you guys, Miss Kaylee and I have been talking about it. It's been really, really cold here lately. So while I'm looking through here, I don't see a lot of activity. I see some holes, so somebody's been eating through that. I don't know, Erin, if you can pick that up, but the log itself is very cold. It almost feels like it's frozen. When you guys come here in May, mid-May, definitely do what I'm doing. Start to break up some of these pieces. And you might find you could find a salamander in here. You never know what you'll find. Definitely, you should find some life in here. Today, it's just awfully cold.
Yeah.
So we're not finding a whole lot just yet.
A lot of our decomposers need warmer weather.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're gonna keep going now, and we're going to our completely decomposed sign.
A little bit farther down, there's a sign for the completely decomposed rotten log. So as I was saying, animals like worms will eat away at the log until eventually it's just a pile of dirt, and that material that was once the log is really important in nourishing the soil and really just like returning and giving back to the ecosystem.
You can see a little bit of the remnants of it here.
Yeah. So there was once a log here. And I don't know if you could get a picture of the sign where it's a little bit more orange looking, like I pointed out the last log we saw.
That's what we want to look for.
That was almost decomposed.
That's on your scavenger hunt, and you'll find those if you look really hard. And the whole point of this, parents, is for your kids not to just find specific things and learn, you know, about what it's all about. It's just to use their eyes and, you know, be observant and look around and look for things. And you can see right here, right, Miss Kaylee? That's decomposed.
Yes. And I just found some more lycopodium over here.
Hooray! We finally
More
found some.
lycopodium right here by my foot. So yeah, it's really important because when you know some different things to look for out here, the world really opens up to what you can find. Okay, so we just reached the end of Salamander Street, and because we're finishing up on Loop 1, we're going to head this way. You can see the Loop 1 arrow. If you go that way, like Mr. Tom said before, that's Loop 3, it's longer. This will lead us back to the parking lot. So we're going to go this way, and the first thing you're going to see coming up here,
And you're on Turtle Turnpike.
yes, this is Turtle Turnpike, is a sign about our charcoal kiln. So, this is another historic site we have in the Discovery Zone, but a kiln was something that people used to use in order to make charcoal. So charcoal is made when you burn wood down. You know, if you've ever seen in a fireplace when the wood gets really blackened, that's charcoal. And so that was really important to use in furnaces to make things like iron, yeah.
Yeah. So this was a 19th century
Yeah.
kiln. It would have been in this mound area here. When you guys come here, check out the sign. You can see a really good picture of what a kiln looks like with all of the wood stacked up before they burn it. And then try to find some of the charcoal here.
Yeah, there's definitely pieces on the ground. So just like the tool making station, this is another place where we are going to ask you guys to not take anything so other people can see it too. But it's really cool to be able to pick it up, and you could even you could even try to write on your scavenger hunt with it and see if it works. And then you could also check it off on your scavenger hunt. So
I'm gonna do it.
Yep.
Well, I found a piece for sure.
We are still walking on Turtle Turnpike. We're a little ways past the kiln, and I just wanted to point out that on this side of the path, if you look downwards, you can see a little body of water here that's called a vernal pool. So vernal pools are really important to the Discovery Zone. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about them in later classes, but we are very lucky to have a lot of little hidden ones around the property, so we just wanted to point that out, that this is down here.
And before we started talking just now, I think I heard something. What did you hear before, Miss Kaylee?
I heard a frog. So frogs live in the vernal pools. It's a really important habitat for them. So you might be able to hear frogs too when you're walking in this area. So now we're at our lichen sign. And so lichen is
Miss Kaylee. Can you hear that? I don't know if you guys can hear that in the background with the wind blowing. But we were just talking about frogs.
I hear a frog.
And that's a different vernal pool that's hiding.
Yes.
That I don't know if we will be able to see. We might be able to see. Okay. But yeah, that's a peeper, right?
Yeah, so peepers make like really high-pitched peeping noises. Maybe later in this class we'll talk about different types of frogs and their frog calls. But yeah, so we are at the lichen sign. So lichens are a really, really interesting form of life that we have a lot of here in the Discovery Zone. But basically, lichens grow on trees, so you can see them on pretty much any tree you look at. Here's a really good example. Maybe I should point to something that you can see. So all these pale green spots on this tree are all lichen. The dark green on the tree is moss. So lichen is actually a combination between algae and fungus. So we usually find algae in the water, and fungus is like mushrooms or fungus. So a lichen's a combination between those things. And they're really all over.
They're strange, yeah, but they are everywhere.
They're
and
on
you
rocks,
can see them
too.
on rocks. You can see them right on the rock where we have a little stepping rock for you to look at the sign. That's lichen, right, Miss Kaylee?
Yeah. So lichens are decomposers too. So if you see a lichen on a log, they could also be breaking that down.
Definitely. All right, you guys. So lichen, I think, is probably going to be, if you're really paying attention, you're going to find a lot of it.
Yeah.
So you should definitely be able to score a lot of points with lichen. I think we only give you 1 point for lichen because there's so much of it. And
yeah.
we should point out, parents and kids, we base our points on how hard it is to find. So for example, there's a lot of lichen out there, so you only get 1 point for that. And there's a lot of decomposed logs, things like that. But you know, it's harder to find like a deer rug. Maybe we'll talk about that on the way back.
Yeah.
We can find a few of those. So things that are harder to find, some of them aren't going to be on loop 1 either. We give you more points for those.
Yeah, and we encourage you guys, if you want to come back and do loop 2 or even loop 3, to bring the scavenger hunt and see if you can find more stuff.
I see more lichen. I'm going to check it out.
Boy.
All right, you guys, so Miss Kaylee just noticed something else, and you start to see this more on loop 2, which we're not going to do today, but we definitely encourage you to come out and do that with your parents too as part of the scavenger hunt.
Yeah. So we are looking at mountain laurel, which is these little trees with glossy leaves right here. If you look at mountain laurel, a lot of times you can tell that the branches are really twiggy and twisty. There's some more over there. If any of you guys have read Harry Potter, I've had campers who call it the Harry Potter forest before when there's a lot of mountain laurel around. But the really cool thing about mountain laurel is that when they flower, they have these really cool pink flowers. And mountain laurel is actually our state flower of Connecticut. So if you see some, that would be really cool. But either way, if you're up here, you can check off mountain laurel on your scavenger hunt because there's plenty around.
And one thing you notice though is that we didn't see any prior to this. We're just starting to see it now, and you'll see it all throughout loop 2. So what does that tell you about the overall topography? What does topography mean, Miss Kaylee?
So topography is another way to say elevation, or in other words, are you up on a hill or are you down lower? So when you come and do this walk, you'll know that where we are is much higher up than where we started. So that means that this mountain laurel that we're seeing is growing at a higher topography than some of our other plants.
We are still on loop 1. When you get to the corner of Turtle Turnpike and Pond Parkway, we want you to stay on Turtle Turnpike, loop 1. We're going to go to our animal sand tracks next. If you want to make it a really long walk, you could do loop 2, but for today, for our class, and it's about an hour, I think, loop 1, or even a little more, we're going to stay on Turtle Turnpike and go to our sand tracks, and we're going to go down the hill, back down to Froggy Freeway. So our mammal sand tracks are pretty cool, and Aaron can get a picture of some different footprints. It's been hard for us to work with this lately because we've had so much rain. When we get rain, we can't really use our sand tracks because they get all wet and washed out. So what we try to do here is put down a bait of some sort. This morning, I actually put down a bait that would attract cottontail or rabbits. And Miss Kaylee and I are investigating right now. We definitely see a shoe print of a human, but we will definitely find evidence of animals that'll come here. They will smell whatever we put on our cotton balls and walk through the sand tracks. So when you guys come here, make sure you check out the sand tracks. If you see something that looks like an animal footprint, go back to our sign and see if you can match it up to the print that you see in the sand. And the drier it gets, the easier it'll be for us to maintain the sand tracks and keep putting bait down. And now, Miss Kaylee was just talking about the mountain laurel. If you look past her, up ahead, as you go into more high ground up there, like she was talking about, that's where you're going to see a lot of mountain laurel. So we came down Turtle Turnpike from the sand tracks, and now we are back to...
We're back to this signpost. So this is where we went to go down Hawk Highway. Now we're going to go this way back down Froggy Freeway to get back to the parking lot.
Although I think we're going to take a quick little detour
That's right.
to Classroom Court. We're going to do sort of the backward loop of Classroom Court, and that's where we're going to be looking for some other friends of ours who live at the park.
Okay, so we just came back out of the Froggy Freeway to the intersection, so if we went straight, we'd be going back down Froggy Freeway. But like Mr. Tom said, before we do that, we're going to go down Classroom Court, which is this way. So, yeah, you can see the sign.
Checking off that probably you guys will see if you're looking really hard that we have been walking by monstrous ones are stone walls. We pointed them out originally, but there are a lot of them on your walk, so make sure you pay attention. But here's a great stone wall example, and hopefully when you guys come here you'll see this one. This was an 18th century stone wall. Look how big that is. Look how much work that would have taken. That would have kept all the animals in the farm, right?
Yeah, it's crazy because the stone walls were built and they've just lasted for 200 or 300 years, so pretty crazy. And like we said, some of the rocks in the stone wall might actually be from the quarry that we stopped at. There's a really big rock at the bottom of the stone wall over there that I see, but you guys could look out for other ones too.
And then, Miss Erin, if you come here, you can see, like, this is where Miss Kaylee is talking about our trees in a row, the pine plantation. You can see how that's all fallen over. And Erin, if you can maybe pan through here, all of these used to be planted. But now if you look close up here, what do you guys see in the wood? Looks like a lot of woodpeckers have been pecking away. And I guess the question is, did they make those trees fall, or were they already dying to begin with? And they were probably already dying to begin with, but a lot of woodpeckers have been pretty busy in here. And actually the dead trees serve a very good function for a lot of our wildlife and habitat. Who likes to live in a lot of these dead trees, do you think, Miss Kaylee?
Let's see, well, who did we talk about beforehand? We talked about worms and bugs and slugs, but even animals like little frogs and salamanders like to shelter under logs because they can stay away from predators. And animals like frogs and salamanders, what do they like to eat, Mr. Tom? Bugs and worms, so they can find food down there too. And when you're walking on Classroom Court, if you look around, you can see a lot of logs that are on their way to being decomposed.
And some of these hollowed out trees might have squirrel nests, might have owls, other birds. So they definitely serve an important purpose in wildlife.
They do.
All right, so Miss Kaylee, why don't we do a quick roll of a log here before we get too far? We're going to make this a class in and of itself where we just look for stuff under logs. But we're going to just roll one log, and Miss Kaylee can explain why I'm rolling it toward me.
So Mr. Tom is rolling the log. First of all, very important, he's only using his hands. He's not using his feet. And that's because we need to be gentle, because some of the animals that we were talking about that live under there can be pretty small, right? And now we roll the logs toward us and not away from us, because if there is something big under there, like a snake or a frog, we want it to go shooting out away from us, not towards our feet.
And as I said, we're going to do a lot more log rolling when it's warmer out, when we'll be able to see more things. I see a little beetle, I see a slug, I see a mite. But we might start seeing some more stuff. We'll definitely see more worms when the ground warms up a little bit.
And notice that underneath the log, the spot he just rolled, it looks really wet, much wetter than the ground around it. And that's a sign of decomposition usually if things are wetter.
All right, and then let's make sure when we roll a log that we put it back right where it was.
Yes. Yeah, because that's something's house. You would not like it if someone took off your roof and then put it down in your backyard. So we always put the logs back where they came from.